The first time it happened, he didn't notice. A subtle absence, a pause where there had always been action. But soon the silence became undeniable. The body that once obeyed suddenly refused. What if in an instant a man could no longer achieve or sustain an erection? What would happen to the man, to those around him, to the world he inhabits? This is not a tale of choice. This is not a gradual decline. This is sudden, irreversible, and complete. A human force of nature, intimate, personal, yet boundless in its implications, snatched away overnight. We rely on the male reproductive system for more than just survival. It is a biological engine, a chemical orchestra, a bridge between desire and creation. To disrupt it is to disrupt a thread woven through history, culture, psychology, and society itself. The scenario is simple to state, yet its ripples are complex. Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering your body has betrayed you. The machinery that once responded instinctively now lies dormant. No warning, no pattern, nothing. First, we must understand what has changed. The male body is governed by hormones, testosterone coursing through veins, nitric oxide signaling in tissues, a delicate balance of neurotransmitters and blood flow. Erections are more than physical. They are chemical symphonies, messages from mind to body. Interrupt the signals and the system collapses. Sudden impotence, medically termed acute erectile dysfunction, is rare. And yet in this scenario, it is universal. Every man everywhere instantaneously loses the ability to perform sexually. The immediate physical consequences are startling. Men would face an immediate confrontation with their own bodies. Confusion, anxiety, the stark realization of a failure they cannot control. Doctors would scramble. Treatments exist, pills, devices, surgeries, but none work if the root mechanism has vanished entirely. Historically, human cultures have linked male potency to power, identity, and even divinity. Kings, warriors, and emperors, so much of their authority rested upon an unspoken proof of vitality. In some cultures, impotence was considered a curse, a signal from the gods that the man had failed not only himself, but the universe. Now, imagine all men at once facing that ancient stigma. Socially, the effects would be seismic. Relationships built on intimacy would strain. Trust, affection, desire, all would be tested under a new, stark light. The emotional toll would manifest in isolation, depression, and perhaps a profound questioning of identity. Societies built around reproduction, families, lineages, dynasties, would face a silent, invisible collapse. Economically, the consequences would ripple outward. The global fertility industry alone, hormone therapies, reproductive clinics, sexual wellness markets, would cease to function in its traditional sense. Demand would skyrocket for alternatives, for innovation, for workarounds. Biotechnology companies would scramble for solutions. But no instant cure could satisfy an entire world overnight. And then there is the biological consequence: reproduction itself. Without sexual activity capable of procreation, birth rates would plummet. Natural conception would vanish. In decades, societies would confront demographic collapse. Populations would age rapidly, leaving behind a world with fewer young to sustain economies, cultures, and traditions. The human species itself would confront an invisible countdown. The mind does not remain untouched. Sexual function is deeply tied to confidence, identity, and mental health. Sudden impotence strikes at the core of self-perception. Anxiety, shame, and existential despair would become global phenomena. Counseling services, therapy, and psychological research would be overwhelmed, scrambling to keep pace with a crisis that is as internal as it is external. Consider the comparison to other sudden, global biological changes. The Black Death swept Europe, killing millions in months. The influenza pandemic of 1918 reshaped societies overnight. Yet those were visible, measurable disasters. Sudden universal male impotence is silent, insidious, and invisible, its effects accumulating quietly yet devastatingly over decades. Step by step, the world would adjust. Initially, shock and disbelief. Men consulting doctors, scientists analyzing blood, hormones, tissues, governments attempting to provide guidance, religious institutions framing the event in moral or spiritual terms. Next comes adaptation. Technology and biology would intersect. Artificial reproductive methods, genetic engineering, cloning, and hormonal interventions would become priorities. Societies would shift emphasis from sexual reproduction to assisted reproduction. Relationships might evolve to prioritize emotional connection over physical intimacy. Economically, industries would pivot. Pharmaceuticals would dominate the global stage. Biotech firms would hold power akin to the oil barons of the 20th century. Nations that mastered solutions could control population recovery, potentially altering geopolitical dynamics. Yet some effects cannot be engineered away. The emotional and cultural dimensions are stubborn. Traditions that once celebrated virility would fade. Art, literature, and media would reflect a new reality. Sexuality, long considered a defining human trait, would need reinterpretation. From a scientific standpoint, this scenario challenges our understanding of evolution itself. Male sexual function is not merely personal. It is central to the propagation of species. To interrupt it globally is to interrupt an evolutionary engine. The consequences would echo not only in human society, but in the ecological niches humans influence. Over decades, other species reliant on humans for interaction, agriculture, or symbiosis would feel subtle pressures. The cause and effect chain is profound. Immediate physical impotence triggers psychological strain. Psychological strain triggers social unrest, relational tension, and cultural shifts. Social unrest and cultural shifts trigger economic upheaval and demographic crises. Economic upheaval and demographic crises trigger political realignments and technological arms races. And all the while, humanity would be forced to confront its mortality and legacy in new, unprecedented ways. Even personal relationships, once thought intimate and private, would face public scrutiny. Marriage, sexuality, and reproduction, long considered private domains, would become collective social concerns. Policies, healthcare, and societal norms would have to adapt, reshaping centuries of tradition almost overnight. Yet, in the face of such despair, there may also emerge resilience. Humanity has historically adapted to catastrophe. New forms of intimacy, new definitions of identity, new technologies to bypass natural limitations, these are likely to emerge. What begins as crisis may, in time, become a new equilibrium. In considering this, we see not only fragility but ingenuity. The human spirit has confronted plagues, wars, famines, and environmental collapse. Sudden impotence, while uniquely personal, is a mirror of vulnerability, a test of adaptability. And the larger question remains, if our most intimate biological functions can be snatched away overnight, what does that tell us about the fragility of human experience? About the reliance we place on mechanisms we barely understand? About the invisible threads upon which societies, relationships, and cultures hang? What if this scenario is not just imagined, but a lens through which we see the delicate architecture of our existence? What other forces, biological, technological, or cosmic, could instantaneously rewrite the human condition, challenging everything we take for granted?